Right. Clap one on three. 1, 2, 3. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another. It's been some time, folks. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of True Crime and Cocktails. We're so glad that you're here. As always, I am your host, Lauren Ash, and as always, I am joined by my co-hostess with the mostess, Christy Oxborrow. How you feeling?
Great. We're dusting it off.
Dust yourself up and try it again.
Oh,
Dust yourself up and try it again. Try it again.
first you don't succeed.
There it
Yeah,
is.
yeah. That's what we're bringing into 2025. The same bullshit we had in 2024.
Yep. 2025. More bullshit. More, I don't know. Give up on a joke.
2025, we're barely alive.
Well, literally.
Yeah.
Literally.
We're doing great.
Previously on True Crime and Cocktails.
How did I not think of that? Oh,
We should have done
well
that off
done.
the top. I know.
Well done.
Listen, we took a winter break this year and we were so excited because anytime we typically take a break, it's not a break. There's always stuff that has to be done.
Yeah.
We always have to try and get ahead. It even if there's not an episode currently on, it doesn't mean that we're not working. But we thought,
Right.
look, if we would do an extra long break at Christmas, after Christmas, I should say, then we actually will get a break. Like it was like
Yeah.
designed this way, right? Like there was a reason we did this. And as soon as we were getting it, like the last episode we recorded, Christy absolutely on death's door of illness, as always
Yep.
happens to her in December.
Yep.
And then I was going through a massive mental breakdown about something else. And then the wildfires broke out in LA. So it literally went from, you know, Christy got well just in time for the break to be over. And I had a complete mental breakdown followed by having to potentially evacuate my home. So it's not been a break, folks. It's not been a
Yeah.
break.
Yeah. I went most of that break, I'd say 2/3 of that break, with no ability to speak.
Yeah.
So there was that. Christmas was just a nightmare. I was so sick. And then by the time I got better, I then realized all the stuff I wanted to do, like around my home, sprinkle that, kind of sprinkle those chores in and around the weeks we had. I had only days to get it done.
Hmm.
So then I worked like a dog to get stuff done. Is it done? No.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
it's half done. It's everywhere. It just is what it is. And if nothing else, as soon as Christmas was over, we had to postpone one of our Christmases because I was so sick and I was supposed to cook the meal. And so I was like, well, those two things can't go together. So we had to keep postponing it till January because I was so sick. So, but we got there finally. And then when it was done, I was like, God, the Christmas season is over. And I had this heavy realization that I spend half the year anticipating Christmas. And then as soon as Christmas is over, I spend the rest of the year anticipating Eurovision.
That's right. You do have kind of two seasons
I
every
do.
year.
I do. The
Yeah.
holiday season. And then there's that long drought waiting for Eurovision. Not that long. I mean, it should be, I don't even know when, hopefully March, April, we'll be able to start hearing the songs that were chosen. I have a specific chart that I print off for myself so I can make notes every year. I'm ready. This is good for me.
I love to see this for you. I
Yeah.
love to see this for you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, listen, I hear you. You know, I can't get into all the details. Yeah, I've been thinking when it comes time, I'm like, do I do an episode of the show that's just about my car? Like, do I do a
Oh.
full episode of the show?
Oh boy. Well, there's enough for an episode.
There's enough for an episode. Um, anyway, I can't get into it too much for a multitude of reasons that will eventually become evident, but I have been embroiled in something essentially since October that took a wild turn on Christmas Eve. And we talk on this show like we'll talk all the time about like, oh, I'm unwell, I'm mentally everywhere but here, like everywhere but nowhere. Like we'll talk about those things. But
Mhm.
for me, I experienced uh what it feels like to actually have a mental break.
Oh, you left your body.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And it was watching my parents as I was having this very extreme moment.
sure.
It, I out of my body
Yeah,
laughing because uh, I was watching them like take a step towards me, a step away, step towards me, a step away. Like it was like they're like, "Do we go to her? Do we not? Do we go to her? Do we not?
yeah,
Oh God, is she okay? I don't know if she's okay. Does she want this? Does she not?"
yeah,
Um, and it's not funny. But the image of the whole thing outside of my body watching was quite comical because yeah, I crossed over. So I've just been in like such a hell between everything I've been through last year and losing Fox in December and then having this absolute shit show nightmare happen and then the wildfires.
yeah.
Um there's been a couple days where honestly like from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed I couldn't move. Like I literally like got to the couch. I like feed the animals and then it's like couch until night. Like take Bean for a walk, order some food, and I just can't function. Like it's been so overwhelming. And now, granted, when the wildfires, that was before the wildfires actually, because when they started, it was like you got to be ready to go.
Yeah.
And the first couple nights of those, there was a fire that was less than 3 miles from me, so I was like, I gotta be ready to go. I gotta pack a bag. Um, and there is it's a very we talked about it over on Patreon and I won't belabor it here because it's heavy and a lot, but it's a very strange experience to be like, well, I'm safe where I am for now as I watch
Right.
fires on every side of me grow and grow and grow. It's a very strange sensation that you're like in this weird limbo where it's like these destructive things that could destroy you and everything you have. You just gotta keep those fingers crossed that those winds don't get worse. And it's
Right.
been wild. It's been absolutely
No
wild.
pun.
Thank you very much. It's been absolutely wild. Not at all fire. It's
Oh
terrible.
boy.
Terrible
Boy.
joke. I'm
Yeah.
still coming down,
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
not over.
we used to say like getting by as like we didn't even know how much further we could go
It's
when we
cute.
started using it.
It's cute that I ever thought I had problems. It's very cute.
Ah!
It really is. It really is. But yeah, listen, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with some of the fallout of what I'm currently going through. And then I'm like, maybe if I just don't say any names, like maybe I just tell the story.
Oh, sure.
Because the whole story, like it could, I think it honestly could fill an episode, don't you think?
Yes.
Let us know. Send us comments. You want to hear Lauren's like the story that made her actually have a mental breakdown? Let us know.
Oh, I have to believe they do. I just feel, yeah,
Yeah.
just leave names out and or create other names if you need
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. I could just change all the names for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, and you can
my
do
God.
like an SVU beginning where you're like, the names of the people in this story have been changed to, I can't think of what the actual wording is, but
Yeah. Well, traditionally, it would be to protect them. In this case, it would be to protect me.
yeah, well, if you could just get away with to protect the innocent,
To protect the innocent. Great
that
point.
still works. Still
Great
works.
point.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well,
Oh my word. But listen, all I spend my days doing now is administrative work, planning my concert that I'm doing in Toronto on
oh
February 12th.
yeah.
It's a anti-Valentine's Day show at the Phoenix in Toronto. It's 19 and over. And I apologize to anyone who's under 19 that wants to come. It wasn't my choice. But tickets are $25 plus fees, which I think is a steal. Me, 2 other bands. I'm headlining. You can get the tickets at the bio, on my bio, on Instagram, Lauren Elizabeth Ash, or on my website, laurenash.band. But listen, if you're in Toronto, the surrounding area, come on out. It's going to be a hoot and a half. Yeah.
Well, I think this is great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, it's keeping me tethered to the earth. Let's put it that way. It's giving me purpose. I have to get up every morning. I can't
Mhm.
just lay around from morning till night. I've got shit I have to do. It's,
Of course.
in many ways I've bitten off more than I can chew, and fantastic. How wonderful. How
You're doing
wonderful.
great.
Wouldn't be a Lauren Ash joint if she hadn't bitten off more than she can chew.
Thank you so much for joint.
You're welcome.
And what I also should say on behalf of me and the people, thank you for being here.
Listen, this is also good. Having to have something to do is also good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, get you out of bed, get you in
Yeah.
fresh clothes, get you. These
Hey.
pants are not fresh. These sweatpants are not fresh. I'll be honest. I'm gonna
Well,
be
you know
honest.
what? I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
From the tits up, you're very fresh.
Thank you very much. And isn't that all that really matters?
That's the only place people are looking. I'm fairly
Right.
certain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, it's not a
So listen,
cartoon. I don't see like scent lines coming out anywhere. So I think you're doing great.
I'm not pig penning, so I'm doing well.
Ah, thank you for making that a verb.
Has to be.
I like it. I like it a
Has to
lot.
be.
Again,
Yeah.
the same 2024 bitches.
Yep.
Just in another year.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I did find I've been writing 2025 as the year for ages. So like my brain just kept trying to skip 2024 and now I'm like, "Oh, I get it." Um but now that we're in 25, when I go to write my notes, I'm like reading it and I'm like, "Wait, how did this happen in July 2024? July hasn't happened yet." So now my brain's reverted and is like, "Well, we're in 2024." And I'm
Right.
like, "Lady, pay attention." Like it's also been a beat since I've like done notes. So my brain was like not sure what to do. So just know when I brought these papers to this office to record, they were hot off the printer because my, my husband looked at me at the plan was we were sitting down to record at 9 and my husband looked at me at I want to say it was like almost 8:30. And he goes, "So you said earlier that you had like note that you were working on those notes." And I went, "Yeah." And he goes, how'd you do to finish it? Like how'd it go for you to finish them off?" And I went, "I'll tell you when I'm done." And he went, "Aren't you recording it?" I went, "Uh-huh." And he just went, "Oh my." And that's the do I go closer? Do I go back?
Yeah.
Do I go
Does she need
closer?
me? Does she want it? Does she want this?
Yeah.
Does she not? Does she want this? Does she
Yeah.
not? Yeah.
It was just that moment where I was like, "Yep, still working on it." And it's just because when it's once I've done it, I need to read it over again out loud to myself so I can hear how it sounds because if there's something wrong and sometimes there's typos, but the computer doesn't think they're typos and there's things like that that I have to fix. And then sometimes I'm like, "Wait, how did I get here? I haven't even done that." And it's a whole thing. Is it going to end up being perfect? Ooh. Am I going to try and improvise in the middle? Probably.
Wow. That's
I don't know
exciting.
what's going to happen. I don't
Oh, it'll
know.
be great.
I
It'll be
have so
great.
much rage about certain things in this episode, but like, I'm just going to probably yell about men a lot. So
Well,
see,
once again,
same
same
old bitches.
2024 ladies. Like, there's nothing new here.
Yeah,
Nothing new.
yeah. We
Um,
are who we are.
we are who we are. We are who we are. And also, how beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
How beautiful.
Yeah. Look, what I love is everyone's like, there's always that pressure of like new year, new you.
Sure.
Yeah. And I'm always like, these are the resolutions I'd like to do, and I never do them. I'm slowly like trying to come up with more reasonable ones that I'll actually accomplish or whatever, but I don't make anything big that's gonna stress me out. And I'm bringing this to you,
Hmm.
you specifically, and the people are just like hearing it. because I know you're going to be on my side
Mhm.
in this situation. I wish I had the exact amounts for sizing and pricing because I know I should be bringing the details. But so I've been like really enjoying a little like fresh veg in a ranch as as
Sure.
as a part of my lunch. I've really been digging it. Digging it. Jesus Christ.
I like that
Anyway.
you've shortened veg and also brought out digging it. Like, I guess
Okay, well,
2025, some things are new.
I guess that's my new me. Somehow I've gone back 50 years. So I've been consuming a lot of ranch, a lot more ranch than I have in the last like year.
Mhm.
So I go to the grocery store today and I'm like, I'm out of ranch. I have depleted our supply. So I'm like, well, I'm going to grab this. And I'll say it, I'm a Hidden Valley.
Great.
I can't I can't not. It's the brand I've found that I like the best. It's the most consistent for me. I'm sticking with it. So fine. So I go to grab the bottle. I wish I could again remember the size. I want to say it's like 473 mils, something along those lines.
Mhm.
And it was like, oh God, it was almost $5. Again, I wish I had the pricing, but I looked at it and I went, maybe I should grab two just so I have one in the pantry just for when this runs out. And then my eye scans down, and at the very bottom, I see a slightly larger bottle. And I went, hey, yo, what's that? I pulled it up, and that bitch is like a liter. And it was like $8.97.
Mhm.
And so I went, hold up. Buying this single one
Yeah.
is cheaper
Yeah.
than buying those two. And so I was like, well, this makes economic sense. So, like, obviously, I'm going to get that. And the look on my husband's face when I turned around with a liter of ranch and put it in the cart, and he stared at me and went, what are you doing? And I was like, well, it's cheaper. And he was like, do we need that much ranch? I'm like, I was going to buy two of those. Our youngest puts like dips everything in ranch. So I was like, we always have a lot of ranch. I've purchased two before, like usually when they're on sale. I'll buy two of them. And you've never said a word. Why is it because I bought this bottle that he was like, it's a liter? Like, do you need that much ranch? And I was like, I'm not drinking it. I'm not consuming the whole thing in a sitting.
Well, would it be
That
would
bad
it
if
be
I did?
would it be terrible if you were drinking it?
It's
Asking
Hidden
for a
Valley,
friend. Asking
obviously.
for a friend.
Oh, I think Hidden Valley's like the peak ranch that you can get if you're gonna drink a ranch.
Well, you'll love,
Ugh.
as you've been telling me this, I've been
Yeah,
frantically taking notes because there's nothing, one of the things I'm most passionate about in life is ranch. So I was like, okay, I want to
of
make sure I
course.
have all of this information in front of
Well, I'm
me.
gonna I'm gonna try and verify sizing and prices for you because I feel
Yeah.
like I if I knew I was bringing this up, I would have.
Look,
Um,
I don't think it's possible to have too much ranch. And you will go
there
through
we
it.
go. Oh,
You will go through it.
yes,
It's not a condiment that, listen, there's some condiments, you try a new one, it's a bit of a swing. You put it in the fridge, maybe it sits there half eaten for years. That's possible. Ranch is
sure.
something I feel like, a lot of people, present company included, have to replace on the regular. Like I'll be honest, Hidden Valley has sent me some product. Now, this is not an ad. They've paid me no
Okay,
money, but they have sent me product in the past. So I had a bunch of ranches. Now, some of the things they sent me, I got to tell you, one of the items was a ranch with Parmesan mixed into it. And fun fact, for years, whenever I eat ranch, this is a tip. This is a tip. If you love your ranch,
yeah,
put some Parmesan cheese in it, stir it up. It's a game changer. If you're feeling really sassy, little black pepper, little black pepper, mix it up. It's got just like a hint of the pepper spice. Ooh, that tangy Parmesan cheese in the ranch. Mwah! Mwah!
here's the thing. I knew I was coming to the right person.
Oh, God, yeah.
I knew I was coming to the connoisseur.
Thank
I
you very
didn't
much.
know that we were going to get recipes based on whether or not you're feeling sassy. And I couldn't
I
be
like that I'm
happier.
giving what you're calling recipes, which is just a condiment with other condiments in the condiment. But yeah,
So I guess what we're saying is I might drink it. Um, so here's the thing. I've got all the sizing for you. And look, I'll tell you, the bottle just doesn't look as big seeing it. But then beautifully, I've looked up the website. It's even telling me the price to prove that I was right.
fantastic.
So the one I was going to buy is
Yeah.
473 mils
Mhm.
and it's $4.77,
Okay.
which
Pretty
according to
good deal, if
this
I'm being honest.
says
Pretty good deal.
it's $1.01 per 100 mils is what the website is telling me. I went for the 1.06 liters for $8.97, which drops that bitch to 90 cents per 100 mil.
Mhm.
So I'm like, economically, I'm like Mr. Moneybags. Like that was the smart,
Sir Moneybags.
it's the richest person I could think of. It's, it's not a real person.
I also just need to let people know I've done a
Yeah.
quick conversion for the Americans.
Oh, of course.
That's 329 for that for the 473 milliliter bottle of ranch. That's a good deal. Or I'll speak
Yeah.
for myself. That's certainly a good deal in California. You won't see it that cheap in California. I don't know if there's other places in the States where it's a lot cheaper. Let me just convert the 897 also. I'm just trying to get more people on your side. You know what I mean? If we put it into
Of
terms that they
course.
understand, $6.19 US. That's a steal for a liter of ranch.
Right?
Yes.
It's also like I had commented, I know that Costco sells an even bigger one and it's a 2-pack. And so I
Oh
was
yeah.
like, it could get worse.
I've bought that. In the past, I've bought that from Costco.
Oh, yeah. Okay, here we
Absolutely.
go. Here we go. Costco,
Mhm.
it's 2 bottles of 1.18 liter, 18.99.
Hmm.
Yeah, which is very, very close, I
Right.
think, to the
It
8.97
would be
for,
close. It would be close, yeah.
but
Um,
so I
and a
guess
little
they
bit
are,
more ranch, because that's 1.18 as opposed to
yeah.
1.06.
And they're only giving me price per liter, so that's not helping me. Because yeah, they're saying it would be about $8.05 per liter, and I paid $8.97 for that liter. So yeah, you get a little bit more, but yeah, again, I wasn't that far off.
Here's the thing.
Yeah,
I've pulled up my local Ralph's. That's the grocery store that I shop at. Lots of people do.
of
It's
course.
like Kroger for people in other parts of the
Mm,
country. Um, the 473 milliliter bottle,
yeah.
549 American.
Wowzer.
And that's on sale from 579. So
Wow.
again, the conversion that I did before, I mean, it was $3 and change. So this is what I'm telling you here is you got a great deal. You of course brought this to the right person.
Yes.
And I'm telling you
Right?
unequivocally, there was no choice. There was no choice but to get the big one. Get out of here.
The joke
Oh
is
my
gonna be
God.
that,
Pickle ranch.
oh, you'd
Gonna
like
have to try
that.
that.
The joke of my life is gonna be like, depending how long it takes me to get through that, I'm like, you know what? I could see the that size being just the normal one. I can't wait for our youngest to realize that's the size of the bottle. Again, the bottle
Yeah.
doesn't look that big to me, but my husband's been laughing at me about it all day because he's like, "That's so much ranch." I'm like, "Will do you admit you would have said nothing if I had bought 2 bottles of that other one?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I wouldn't have thought anything of it. It's just the size of the other one is so comical." And the joke is I'm gonna forget how much heavier it is, and I'm gonna go to pour it on my plate or in a bowl, and so
Yeah.
much is gonna come out
And
that,
that's going to be a little present to you.
I should probably film it because my reaction is gonna be pretty great.
I just have to remind you that
Yeah.
smaller bottle is 3.29 American.
Yeah.
Here it's 5.49 on sale American. That is
Oof.
$2.20 cheaper. You got a deal and a half on that liter bottle. I'm
Thank you
passionate
very
about
much.
this. I'm happy
Yes.
for you. I'm excited. I'm excited for it. And you know what's nice? It's going to take longer for you to run out. That's what I always
Yeah.
find when I have a bigger bottle or a second bottle of ranch on the go. Then it's like I'm not having to put it on the grocery list every 2 weeks. Yeah, I
Right?
go through it pretty fast. I'm going to be honest. Here's another hot tip.
Yeah.
You looking to you looking to
Yeah.
spice up your ranch a little?
Yeah.
Get a Thai sweet chili sauce. Okay?
Oh.
Mix a little of that in. Stir it up.
Mm-hmm.
Mwah. It's good stuff. It's great on pizza. Great on pizza crust.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Jazzes it up a little. You know what I
Can
mean?
we get serious about contacting the Hidden Valley people and being like, she's ready to put out a recipe book based solely on your products?
Yeah.
Send her a hat. You know what?
They
She's not interested in the hat. The
they've sent
point
me
is,
sweatshirts. They've sent me sweatshirts. So
oh,
they
that's
have sent
nice.
stuff. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That is nice. I
Yeah.
wonder if there's got to be a Hidden Valley Canada, isn't there? Or is it all coming from America? I didn't check where that later came from, but again, I stand by it. It was the right choice. And it was this like very cinematic moment where it was like the camera pans down and is looking at like so much empty shelf. And I'm like, I don't know. And then just like it was pushed back just a little bit on the bottom shelf. So it was kind of in the shadows. And I was like, what do we got here? And it was like, you know, a puppy was being found on the street. And I like got down on a knee and was like, hey, little fella. And I pulled that sucker out. And of
Are
course,
you
there was a
hiding?
woman like watching this whole thing and watching my husband tease me. And I just went, do you want me to eat a vegetable or not? Stared him in
Yeah.
the eye while I put that in the cart. Couldn't have been happier.
Now, I gotta ask,
Yeah.
what's on the crudité menu?
Oh, it's boring. It's
Carrots,
boring. Yeah. I do baby carrots and I do peas.
snap peas.
Yeah. Because I
I just want to make
love.
sure you're not taking each individual little pea and
No,
dipping in a ranch.
no. I think if I had the individual peas, I'd pour them in the bowl with the ranch and just make a soup.
A slurry, of course.
Yeah, that I would do.
Absolutely.
I like the fatter the pea, the better because
Hey, yeah, same.
uh yeah, God, I've said that something along those lines in the last few
You
episodes.
did. You did. You did. Yeah.
Again, I brought the same bitch from last year. Um, no, m- my my grandmother lived on a farm. Well, technically, I mean, both my grandparents, but like my grandparents lived on a farm and they had peas. And we would always like go get all the peas. And then before supper, it was like there's this massive bowl of peas, and people have to like shell the peas so we can have peas for dinner. And I would just like eat those peas. Like once they were shelled, I want to sit and eat shelled raw peas. Those are my favorite vegetable in the world. But you can't really find that size of pea to actually be able to shell because everything's so thin. So now I just, even if they're like the big thick ones, I will just eat the whole thing. And again, these are voice bits I don't need on the internet, but it's too
Yeah.
late now.
I definitely like to eat the big, thick ones too.
The bigger, the bigger, the better. Oh, what am I doing? But yeah, look, I like the carrots because
Hmm.
when it comes to cauliflower, I love a cauliflower, but I
Sure.
like that bitch steamed
Hmm.
with butter and either a light Parmesan dusting or a little bit of salt.
I like
And
that.
that I could just forever. I love that. But I've been doing carrots, peas, and then I'm like, I need something like that'll hit with like a more of a salt. So I'll do like a little turkey,
Oh,
like a little turkey deli meat. And then yesterday I was like, well, I guess I'm adding cheese curds because I had some and I was going grocery shopping and I'm like, I need to also add that. And then it's just like, oh, I think I also then put a buttered bun on the side to just like, well, if we're gonna hit every food group, we're gonna just do it. And yeah, I've been getting into it. And the beautiful thing is, I've been doing this now for weeks, and every day my husband will come out of the office at lunchtime and be like, "What are you having for lunch?" And I'm like, "Don't even have to think about it. I'm having the same thing I had yesterday." And I know it's my hyperfixation thing, and soon I'll hate it.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
I had to go to two separate stores to find peas. People are like, because we're still at that point where everyone's like, we're going to eat better for the year. And that's why people are selling out the peas, I guess.
People? I don't it's not necessary.
Oh,
Not necessary.
take that back. It was very necessary. I liked it a
Um,
lot.
I yeah, walking back for just a quick second, you ever mash your, steamed cauliflower?
I have not.
You can make it like a mashed potato.
Oh,
If you want, you could
okay.
put it in a food processor, make it a puree, add some butter, add a little bit of sour cream. You can dress it like a baked potato. That, for me, does it.
A little cheese and a bacon bit
Yep.
with a cauliflower mash?
Hmm.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't obviously
Yeah,
taste exactly like mashed potatoes. It tastes like mashed cauliflower, but it
of
scratches
course.
the itch. You know what I mean?
And I love cauliflower. I
This
really
is what I'm
do.
saying.
Like
I really
it's,
think you'd like it. It's good.
yeah.
Highly
Well,
recommend.
see, I'm gonna have to look into it. I debated about getting raw cauliflower, but I like it steamed.
Hmm.
And I was like, just stick with what you know you're gonna enjoy and then just move on with yourself.
What you
And
can get here is they like grate the cauliflower somehow into tiny bits. They call it cauliflower pearls. And it's like, it's very
interesting.
fine. And then you can boil that or steam that and then make a
Oh,
yamash. Yeah.
of course. Well, that makes sense.
Cauliflower rice. What am I talking about? Not, well, there is pearls too, but cauliflower rice is what I'm describing.
Oh, sure. I think we do have I think in one of our stores here, at least, that you can get like a separate bag that's little
Hmm.
tiny cauliflower, I do believe.
I recommend.
I think I need to because I think I would really love that.
I think you
Again,
would
I
too.
love that I'm just like, I love cauliflower. It's like, okay, you basic bitch. Like, what a boring, boring thing to proudly state about myself. But look, I am who I am.
Oh, I
There's,
am what I am.
yeah,
Well,
there's
listen,
no change in her.
and there's no need. There's no
No,
damn need.
no.
Um, Look, let's get into the case. But before we do, what you drinking over there?
Oh, I ran out of time because again, I was down to the wire on on this. So I've got a water and I'm doing a folk.
Love
Not a
that.
not a real Coke because you know I like the I'm doing a cola, I should say.
Right.
You know, it's not real.
I have water. I have a Diet Coke. Unprecedented. I have a tiny can of Fresca
Adorable.
because I have had enough Diet Coke today. And I was like, but I want something that's not water because I've also been really trying to up my water. So,
Hey,
yeah, that's what's happening here. But listen,
nice.
we're kicking off 2025 with what I would describe as being one of the most requested cases of 2024. Do you think that's safe to say? I do.
Oh, yes.
We
Yes.
get countless requests for this case specifically. So, guess what, dear listeners? You spoke, we listened. We're talking, of course, the Karen Reed case. And if you're not familiar, just like I'm not, have no fear. I'm going to get you up to speed with a little synopsis right now. In January 2022, Boston police officer John O'Keefe was found dead on the front lawn of a fellow police officer's home. Investigators claim that John's girlfriend, Karen Reed, maliciously hit John with her car following a drunken lover's quarrel. But Karen's defense team claimed that multiple police officers beat John during a house party and then left him outside during a snowstorm to die. The trial became a media circus with many people questioning the trustworthiness of the Massachusetts State Police. In a case that divided the city of Boston, is Karen Reed the victim of a massive police cover-up? Or is she a murderer who is trying to manipulate public opinion? Christy Oxborrow investigates.
Just know. My only disclaimer is I'm going to get real opinionated.
I'm all for it.
So, there's also so much to this and so many names that are the same first name. I'm going to do my best to keep us all on the tracks. So,
Of course.
Karen Reed and John O'Keefe first met at a party in Boston, Massachusetts in early 2004. They were about 26 and 28, respectively. The party was a birthday celebration for John's sister Kristen, and while Karen didn't know Kristen personally, she was invited to the party by a mutual friend. Karen and John exchanged numbers. They ended up dating casually for a few months, but then their romance fizzled out, and the couple then went their separate ways. Karen then battled several health issues over the next few years, including Crohn's disease, which
Oh,
resulted in Karen needing 10 surgeries in just 18 months. And less than a year after her last surgery, Karen was then diagnosed with multiple sclerosis.
oh, geez.
But Karen's professional life was on track as she became a finance lecturer at Bentley University, a position she held for more than 13 years. And then she spent more than 14 years as an equity researcher for Fidelity Investments. During that same time frame, John spent 16 years as a member of the Boston Police Department. He earned a master's degree in criminal justice from Northeastern University. In November 2013, John's sister Kristen passed away following a battle with brain cancer.
Oh,
And just 2 months later, her husband Stephen died from a heart attack.
oh my God.
Kristen and her husband were both 39 at the time of their deaths.
That's gutting.
Well, John stepped in to become a guardian to Kristen and Stephen's two children, 6-year-old Kaylee and 3-year-old Patrick. Jump ahead to spring 2020, which many of you may recall as, I'd say, the heart of the COVID-19 pandemic. Karen received a Facebook message from John which read, "Hey, blast from the past. How's things?" After several messages back and forth, things moved very quickly, and soon Karen was spending most of her time at John's house. She even rearranged her work schedule so she could work remotely from home and be able to take care of John's niece and nephew while he was working. The four quickly became a tight family unit, but as with most relationships, Karen and John had their occasional issues. Karen later said she believed John resented her for because she kind of got to be the fun one with the kids and he was stuck being the disciplinarian. The couple increased their drinking on weekends, and during a group trip to Aruba in early January 2022, Karen claims she caught John kissing another woman.
Oh,
The other woman later denied that anything happened. After they returned home, Karen decided to get back at John by sending flirtatious text messages to an acquaintance of John's named Brian Higgins. Karen later said, quote, "It helped me emotionally validate myself, which is embarrassing to admit." Karen said the flirtation was very brief. Then on January 28th, 2022, a few weeks after their trip to Aruba, John and Karen went out for drinks and met up with a group of John's friends in Canton, Massachusetts. Included in the group were 11 people, including John and Karen. But to spare any confusion, I'm just going to specifically name the ones that are going to come up in this episode multiple times. There was Brian Albert and his wife, Nicole, Nicole's sister, Jennifer McCabe, and Brian Higgins. Yes, the very same man who had that brief flirtatious text correspondence with Karen just weeks prior. Karen and John started the night at CF McCarthy's before moving to the Waterfall Bar and Grill, which is about like a 2-minute walk down the road. They got to Waterfall around 11 p.m., where they joined Brian Albert's group. While John and Albert were both Boston police officers, they didn't really know each other and it was said they'd only met like twice prior to this night. According to multiple witnesses and the surveillance camera at the bar, Karen and John were very affectionate with each other. Around midnight, Brian Albert invited everyone to his house for some after hour drinks to celebrate his son's 23rd birthday, which is weird because the son was not there. So I just found it such an interesting, like, it's my son's birthday. We're all going to get together, but the son was not part of the group that
Mm.
was, or was never mentioned as being part of the group. So Albert's brother, Chris, who was at the bar at the time, he just walked home from the bar. Chris's wife, Julie, had left the bar already because she had a migraine, so she went home early. Everybody else in the group headed separately to 34 Fairview Road, which is about 1.7 miles northwest of the bar. Despite having a few drinks, Karen drove her SUV to Albert's house, but when they got there weren't a lot of vehicles outside, and then Karen started to worry that because they didn't know everybody very well, that they weren't actually invited and that they just assumed they were invited because he was like talking to the whole group. John said he was going to go inside and check and he'd report back. Karen said she waited for 10 minutes, and when she didn't get any response from John, she drove to John's house. Since his niece Kaylee was by herself, she was about 15 at the time. Karen said she dropped John off at 12:24 a.m. Since one of John's exes lived near the Albert house, Karen became concerned that John might be cheating on her. So she called him and left a series of angry voicemails, which included statements like, John, I fucking hate you. You fucking pervert. You're fucking another girl. In the next few hours, Karen called John 53 times.
Whoa.
Yeah. At some point, Karen fell asleep, and when she woke up shortly before 5 a.m., she noticed John had still not returned home. Karen started to panic. John was still not answering his phone, so Karen called Jennifer McCabe to say John didn't return home, and she asked, have you seen him? Jennifer claimed she hadn't seen John at the Albert house at all. So Jennifer offered to call everybody who was at the house and see if anybody had seen him. They all said no, they hadn't seen him. So Karen then calls Carrie Roberts, whose husband is friends with John, and then Karen, Carrie, and Jennifer all go out looking for John. Now at 5:07, security cameras at John's house show Karen's SUV driving like dangerously close to John's SUV in the driveway. Like, I think she's backing out of a garage or something like that. But there is definitely a loud bang in the video, and you watch as the SUV kind of jerks forward. So I assume that means the vehicles did connect. I assume then Karen then drove and picked up Carrie and Jennifer, and then the three women drove to the Alberts house. They arrived around 6 a.m., where they found John's body at the edge of the front yard, covered in snow. He was unconscious, his eyes were swollen shut, and there was blood dripping from his nose. Karen jumped out of the vehicle, and she immediately begins mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Carrie starts doing chest compressions, and Jennifer calls 911. And even while 2 police cars, 1 ambulance, and a fire truck all showed up at the house with lights and sirens going, no one from the Albert family came outside to see what was going on. Both Albert and his wife claimed that they slept through everything, which is surprising since their bedroom overlooked the front yard. But when Jennifer went into the house to inform them what was happening, they still didn't come outside because Albert said he didn't want to interfere with an investigation. And I think that's interesting in itself because all he was supposedly told was John was found barely conscious outside on your front lawn, and he didn't want to go see if John was okay? The two men had only seen each other maybe 3 times, but in court, Albert said he considered John a friend. But if that was true, wouldn't you go outside and check on him? But again,
Mhm.
at that point, all he knew was John was found barely conscious. So my question is, what investigation does he think he might interfere with? It's almost like he knew more than he let on, allegedly. Also, both Albert and his wife said that Jennifer came bursting, that was the word they used, bursting into their bedroom between 6 and 6:30 to say John was found. But I thought Jennifer said she called everybody who was at the house that night, and everybody said they didn't see him. Wouldn't she have called the 2 people who own the house? Because I thought that's what I thought she said she called everybody, but I guess
Right.
not everybody. Um, you know, John was rushed to Good Samaritan Medical Center in Brockton, where he was pronounced dead at 7:50 a.m. John Joseph O'Keefe III, affectionately known by friends and family as JJ, was described as loving, kind, and dedicated. He was just 46 years old. Karen was so distraught at the scene that she was taken to the same hospital for evaluation. She arrived around 8 a.m. The attending physician noted that Karen was hysterical and actively grieving. Karen had blood on her hands and face, I assume from trying to revive John. But since she had no uh, psychiatric history and she was not experiencing any auditory or visual hallucinations, the doctor was like, "There's nothing I can do for you. You're free to go home." Karen simply told the doctor, "I cannot live without John." According to a medical examiner, there were several abrasions on John's right forearm, bruising to his right hand, a small cut above his right eye, a cut to the left side of his nose, and a 2-inch laceration to the back of his head. He also had 2 swollen black eyes and multiple skull fractures that resulted in bleeding in his brain. The medical examiner stated that the injuries likely left John incapacitated before he became hypothermic. The death was officially ruled blunt force injuries to the head and hypothermia. Police believed that Karen was so drunk that she accidentally backed into John when leaving the Alberts. So on February 1st, Karen was arrested on charges of manslaughter, motor vehicle homicide, and leaving the scene of a motor vehicle collision causing death. But when police heard the angry voicemails that Karen had left John, they started to believe that the couple got into some sort of massive argument and that Karen purposely hit John. A first responder told police that Karen was hysterical at the scene and allegedly kept repeating, "I hit him." To be clear, if Karen did in fact say this, I don't think it was a conscious confession. She saw John lying near the last place that she had dropped him off, and in that moment, she thought it was possible. Maybe she backed into him without knowing. She had consumed a lot of alcohol, and I mean, that was the assumption the police had at the beginning, but I'm no expert. So take this with a grain of salt. But I've seen the autopsy photos, which is not something I often specifically go to look for because once you see, it's hard to unsee. Um, but those injuries were not caused by a vehicle. I, I mean, especially he had deep gouges along his arm. But 4 months after Karen's initial arrest, Karen was charged with second-degree murder. In a pretrial hearing in May 2023, the prosecution basically stated they believed Karen got angry with John and purposely hit him with her car. The defense, however, said Karen was not responsible for John's death. They believed Karen was being framed in a massive cover up involving several members of the Boston police force. Karen said, quote, "We know who did it. We know. And we know who spearheaded this cover up. You all know. I was the only one trying to save his life." Karen's trial started in April 2024. Again, there is a lot to cover, so for the sake of clarity, I'm going to try and focus on the main points one at a time, and I'm going to try and do so in a timely manner just so we can get through this by 2026, if we're lucky. I can't even, 2026 sounds like 80 years from now, but
It does.
not the point. So we are going to start with the snowplow driver. Now, I'm just going to refer to him as the driver because, believe it or not, his name is Brian, and we already have two other
Too many
Brians.
Brians, man. Too
And
many
it's
Brians.
starting to get too confusing to bring too many names in. So, on the night of John's death, there was a massive snowstorm in the Canton area. They received about 6 inches of snow overnight. So, of course, snowplows were out clearing the roads. Now, I don't know how many snowplow drivers there are in that area, but one in particular cleared Fairview Road, where the Alberts lived. The driver said he did not see a body when he drove past the house at 2:45 a.m. And yes, it was the middle of the night in a blizzard, so visibility's not going to be great. But according to the driver, the plow gives him a high vantage point, and with the vehicle's bright lights and the fact that he's continually scanning for any sort of obstacles, he believes he would have seen a body if there was one. Just a reminder that the prosecution claimed that Karen hit John around 12:20 a.m. So if he was there at 12:20, you would assume he'd be visible at 2:45. When the driver did a second pass by the house at 3:15, he noticed a Ford Edge parked in front of the house, which is the same model vehicle that Albert drives. The driver found it unusual because the family didn't normally park on the street. And while it is standard protocol for snowplow drivers to call in a vehicle that's parked on the street during a road clearing, the driver chose not to as a courtesy to the Albert family because he'd known them for decades. And yeah, look, I'll say it because we're all thinking it. Eyewitness reports aren't always reliable. I get that. And since he didn't follow protocol and call in about the vehicle, there is no official record of whether the car was there at that time or not. It's basically his word versus the Alberts. The driver said police didn't approach him until 2023, a year or more after the crime occurred. There is a rumor that police wrote the wrong snow removal company in the police report, allegedly to hide this potential witness from investigators. Again, it's a rumor, so I don't know how accurate we're talking here.
Right.
But then we need to talk about the tail light. Now, this is a huge part of this case. So, Karen's father said he saw the vehicle on the morning after John's death. The tail light was cracked. When Jennifer McCabe and Carrie Roberts, who drove around looking for John with Karen, when they saw Karen's tail light that night, they both described it as cracked. They didn't say broken. They said cracked because in this case, there is a big difference between being broken with pieces missing or simply having a single crack. And there was security camera footage from that night showing Karen backing the SUV into John's vehicle in the driveway. The defense claimed the cracked taillight likely happened in that moment, but the prosecution said, well, we looked at John's car and there was no damage. And again, I mentioned it before, but the video is very brief, but you can clearly tell she hit something because there was a loud bang and you watched her car like jerk forward. And that was absolutely enough to crack a taillight because I personally backed into a tree once, not even a big tree, but I backed into a tree and yeah, I cracked my taillight. So to me, it's a perfectly reasonable explanation for how the taillight would get a crack in it. But when police first arrived on scene, they were told John had been hit by a car and they were looking for pieces of taillight, which is fascinating just how quickly they made the assumption he'd been hit by a car, especially because he had no broken bones, which is typical if you get hit by a car. The officers performed a grid search, and because of the falling snow, they chose to use a leaf blower to move the snow so they could search for the taillight pieces, but they didn't find any. Canton Police Chief Ken Berkowitz recused himself and his office from the investigation because one of his officers was Kevin Albert, the brother of Brian Albert, who owned the house.
Mhm.
But that didn't stop Berkowitz from telling his team to drive past the crime scene every day and every night and look for more evidence, which feels legit. Uh, and 6 days after the scene was fully searched, Berkowitz just happened to be driving past when from his car, he noticed a bright red piece of taillight in the snow. He, again, still in the car when he made the discovery. Um, it was such a large piece, it just feels impossible that it could have been missed at the time. But Berkowitz contacted one of the officers and had him go collect the evidence. And the investigators' luck just kept coming because more pieces of taillight were found at the scene February 8th and February 11th. Michael Proctor, the Massachusetts state trooper who was lead investigator on the case, um, he managed to find taillight pieces on February 18th, 3 weeks after John's death. 45 taillight pieces were found in total, which is surprising since not one first officer on the scene testified to seeing even a single piece. In fact, no taillight pieces were found until after 5:30 p.m. when the lead investigator brought in a state emergency response team to search the area. It's just amazing to me that no bright red piece could be seen amongst white snow during daylight hours. But the minute it got dark out, magically those pieces started to appear.
Mhm.
A forensic scientist testified about the damage to Karen's SUV, which included a dent in the trunk door, scratches on the rear bumper, and a broken passenger side taillight. She said she found glass and human hair on the bumper. But let's think about this. Assuming that Karen did hit John with her car, she left the scene and drove to John's house. Then she drove the vehicle back to the scene when she was looking for John. And then later that day, her car was driven to her father's house. Then the police confiscated the vehicle and towed it nearly 60 miles in a snowstorm. And after all of that, somehow the glass and hair managed to remain on the bumper? That feels interesting. The hair was tested. It did come back as a match to John, but a test for blood was done on the vehicle and it was negative. So, how did Karen allegedly hit John with the car and get absolutely none of his blood on it? It feels impossible, especially if the hair on the bumper is meant to indicate that the bumper came into contact with John's head. But then if it hit John's head, how'd the taillight get broken? Because the taillight is quite far up from the bumper. So then that makes no sense because a broken taillight sounds like that was the point of impact. And if so, then how's there hair on the bumper? It doesn't make any sense to me. John's DNA was found on some of the taillight fragments, as well as a broken cocktail glass that was found at the scene. The prosecution suggested that there was surveillance footage of John leaving the Waterfall Bar and Grill with a cocktail glass in his hand. I have not seen that video, so I cannot say whether it actually exists or not. But the prosecution is just more interested in pushing the idea that the glass and hair on the bumper meant John was hit with the car. But the problem for them, the police didn't take any photos of Karen's SUV before they towed it to the police garage. So there's no proof as to what state the vehicle's taillight was in before the police got to it. Meaning, it is so easy for the defense to prove reasonable doubt by suggesting the taillight pieces, glass, and hair were all planted. But if the defense thinks that evidence was planted to make Karen Reed look guilty, well, then what does the defense think happened on the night that John died? Well, they suggested Karen dropped John off at the Alberts house and John got into some kind of altercation with the partygoers, or more specifically, Brian Albert, his nephew Colin Albert, and Brian Higgins. The defense claimed that on February 2nd, a man claiming to be Boston law enforcement contacted them anonymously and said that Brian Albert and his nephew Colin had physically assaulted John inside Albert's house. And when John passed out, Albert and Brian Higgins moved John's body to the front lawn. When this person was contacted for a follow-up interview, he claimed he was only speculating on the case based on the photos of the crime scene that he had seen on the news. But the photos hadn't been released publicly until after that first phone call was made.
Interesting.
This supposed witness later fully recanted, but this was the first time that investigators learned that Colin Albert was at the house because his name is not in any of the police reports. Colin later testified that, yeah, he was at the house, but he said he left when all the people started showing up from the bar. And look, recanted or not, the defense is fully buying this witness's initial statement as their main theory. They believe John was attacked and that he either fell back and hit his head or maybe was struck with an object, causing him to pass out. The men then allegedly took John's body outside, placed him on the front lawn, and then they all claimed he never entered the house. But if John didn't go inside the house, why does his Apple Health app show that he took 80 steps and went up or down the equivalent of 3 flights of stairs after the time he was allegedly dropped off at the house? Why would the app track so much movement if John was laying in the snow the entire time? And even if these men did attack John, why would they do it? What motive would there be? Well, apparently, a few weeks before his death, John complained about drug activity in his neighborhood. It was suggested that Colin Albert had been selling drugs in the area. I didn't find anything to verify that, with exception to some local rumors, so I don't know how accurate it is. The current Canton police chief made a statement during a board meeting on August 8th, 2023, And look, I've seen clips of it, every clip cut off. So I went and found the full board meeting so I could watch the actual board meeting. I'll say it. Bored is a word I would describe it. Or more, I guess, me. But the police chief verified that yes, John had reported drug activity in his neighborhood. He went directly to the detective unit himself to talk to them about it. But the police chief said that there was no proof that anyone linked to John's case was involved in this drug activity. There were also rumors that Colin and John had some sort of a beef because Colin and his friends allegedly partied on John's front lawn without his permission. Again, I don't know how accurate that was. At the time of John's death, Colin would have been about 18 years old. So we'll keep that in mind. Colin testified he'd never been in a fight in his life. So the defense were like, that's interesting. So they showed videos that Colin had filmed where he was threatening to assault some local hockey players. In one of the videos, Colin said, I will fuck you up. And then he said, I will beat your asses. In his defense, he was a high school kid at the time, clearly feeling small and trying to act a lot tougher than he was. So I wouldn't be surprised if he never followed through. Uh, However, in a photo that Colin posted about 2 weeks after John's death, it kind of looks like Colin is healing from a black eye. Like there's just a slight glimmer of something. Maybe it's not, but you never know. It also, even if it was, it could have come from anywhere. But then there were photos taken February 26th, which is almost a month after John's death. Colin can be seen with injuries to his knuckles. He testified that they were marks from a time he slipped on some ice at his house, and it was that he put a hand down to save himself, and that's what happened. Um, and I'm going to say that a lot throughout this, but I'm no expert. But the exact positioning of them look a lot like they're in the process of healing after you punched someone or something. I would just be very interested to see how he fell on this ice that it looked like he almost punched the ground because the positioning of it's just completely like right across his knuckles, and it's like healing scabs that it's like they've been there a bit.
Interesting.
Yeah. But we don't have any photos of Colin from the night that John died because Colin was never interviewed. He's not in any of the police reports. So we're never going to know if he had those injuries that night or not. According to phone records, Colin texted a friend asking for a ride. She said here at 12:10 a.m. He replied, okay. Did he really leave at that moment? Or did John show up as Colin was leaving? Maybe they exchanged a few unpleasantries. Maybe a fight broke out. Maybe it got out of hand. Colin claims he did not see John that night. His uncle, Brian Albert, said Colin was at the house when he first got there, but that Colin left within 5 minutes. Albert said everyone there had a few drinks and left by 2 a.m. when he went to bed. Albert said he might have taken Brian Higgins upstairs for a few minutes to show him pictures of his son, who was a Marine. But Albert was adamant that neither John nor Karen entered the house that night. I do find it interesting that Albert says he might have gone upstairs with Higgins to show him something, because around that same time, John's Apple Health app suggested John went up or down the equivalent of 3 flights of stairs. Is it just a coincidence, or is it possible that John was among the people who went upstairs? Maybe they all went upstairs together. That night was only the 3rd time that Albert and John had met, so it's unlikely that Albert had any sort of beef with John. Again, in court, Albert said he considered John a friend. But I have a feeling that if there was any sort of beef between John and Colin, well, Albert's going to take his nephew's side. Or maybe it was just a group of drunk dudes horsing around and things got out of hand. There is surveillance footage from the Waterfall Bar and Grill showing Higgins and one of the other men in the group playfully roughhousing. Is it possible that energy continued when they got back to Albert's? Maybe John fell and hit his head. Maybe while everybody was like intense and like kind of play fighting, maybe Albert's dog got involved. John gets attacked, he passes out, and the men panic. The only reason I'm bringing up the dog is because those marks on John's right arm are not right. They're not caused by a car accident. I may not be an expert, but I can confidently say that those marks were not caused by a vehicle. The marks look like deep gouges from like animal claws or animal teeth. At the time, the Alberts had a 70-pound German Shepherd mix named Chloe. Apparently, Chloe attacked a neighbor's golden doodle in 2018. When the dog's owner tried to contact animal control, Canton police officer Kevin Albert allegedly stepped in and told the woman's husband that they wanted this to go away. A reminder that Kevin Albert is Brian Albert's brother.
Of course.
Less than 4 months after John's death, Chloe attacked a woman who was walking past their yard. A second woman got injured because she intervened and tried to help. The Alberts then called shelters looking for what they could do with their dog, but the shelters told them it's really difficult to rehome an aggressive dog, so more likely than not, Chloe would be put down. So Albert's wife, Nicole, contacted the woman they adopted the dog from 6 or 7 years prior, and the woman found a person in Vermont who was willing to take Chloe, a person who lived on their own and had a large space so the dog would be free to do what it wants. And that has the absolute energy of the animal has passed kids, but it's actually living on a farm that I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
A person in Vermont who has a large space and lives alone. Okay. Maybe it's true. I don't know. I'm skeptical of everything. Swabs were taken of John's clothing, specifically the right arm of his sweatshirt, but according to a forensic scientist, the test came back as negative for dog DNA. However, the scientist also said the tests uncovered pig DNA, which she said could come from dog food or dog treats.
Interesting.
It's also more than possible that the only 2 swabs that were taken were somehow contaminated. I guess I'm saying the lack of dog DNA does not discourage me from thinking that that dog wasn't involved somehow. It's also, if they were roughhousing and playing around and a dog sees it, they might think you're hurting my people and I'm going to do something to protect you. I'm not saying the dog did anything wrong. I think the dog was trying to protect somebody, but they didn't know how to stop the dog and it, went too far.
Yeah.
It's also interesting that within months of John's death, not only had the Alberts rehomed their dog, but they also suddenly put their house up for sale. Nicole Albert claims they'd been planning to downsize for a while because all their kids had moved out. But before the house was put on the market, the Alberts had the flooring in the basement replaced, including ripping out and re-pouring a section of the concrete. And it's weird to replace flooring in 2022 that was put in 2018.
Here we go.
The Alberts claimed needed to be replaced in 2022 because of flooding. But in the case of flooding, is it normal to also replace the concrete underneath? I mean, I mentioned this to my husband, who, I'll say it, is also not an expert in this field. Um, but I was just curious for another opinion. This is the life he leads. He has no choice. He loves it. Um, but he said, like, maybe depending on the type of damage, like, who knows? But then his big thing was, well, if their basement flooded, then it would have wrecked part of their drywall. So now I want to know, was any of the drywall in the basement replaced?
Great question.
Because often when a room floods, the wall will soak up the water, so you're going to have to cut part of that drywall off and replace it. So I want to know, can I see photos of the flooding damage? Can I see the paperwork that proves you reported that flood to your insurance company? Can I see anything that proves anything about there being a flood and somebody repairing it? Was the flooring removed for another reason? I mean, likely since the home belonged to a police officer, neither the house nor the full front yard were searched after John's body was discovered. The people inside the house also weren't interviewed on the record. The only person in the house that was interviewed was Jennifer McCabe, Nicole Albert's sister. At 2:27 a.m., Jennifer used her phone to search, and there were spelling errors, so I'm just going to read it how it would have been if it was spelled correctly. How long to die in cold? She admitted she did do that search, but she said she made it at 6:24 a.m. because Karen asked her to. She said she opened a browser on window on her phone at 2:27 a.m. to look for coverage of her daughter's sports game. And she left that window open. So then hours later, when Karen said, "Can you search that?" she used that same window. And she said that's how it says she searched it at 2:27. Um,
Is
I
that a
don't know.
thing?
I don't know. I don't know anything about cell phones, which that's the joke. I should have asked my husband about that. I don't know.
That's something he actually would probably know.
Yeah, yeah, that's on me. Um, but it just I don't know. The thing is, Karen was hysterical. And she immediately jumped out of the vehicle and was like mouth to mouth resuscitation. At what point would she have turned to her friend and said, "Find out how long it takes to die in the cold"? I just don't buy it. Um, but also sketchy. Jennifer deleted the search, which isn't a great look. She also allegedly deleted 18 phone calls from that day, two of which were to her sister. According to phone records, Jennifer called Nicole twice shortly after 6 a.m., one at 6:07 and again at 6:08. Both calls were answered. But Nicole said, "I didn't answer them. I was asleep." Because a reminder, despite multiple police cars, an ambulance, and a fire truck all rushing to the scene, the Alberts slept through it all and weren't woken up until Jennifer burst into their room to tell them John's body had been found. It's fascinating. Nicole was able to answer the phone in her sleep, allegedly. And speaking of Nicole, when she first spoke to the police, she told them, again, this wasn't on the record because they just didn't do that. She told them her adult daughter, Caitlin, left around 12:15 a.m. But when she testified in court, Nicole said her daughter was the last person to leave the party, and she simply doesn't recall ever giving another time. Which is interesting to say she left early. She left immediately as soon as we got to the house, or she was the last person to leave. Those are two very conflicting things. But before I get any further, I have to talk about ATF agent Brian Higgins. He is the third man that the defense argued was involved in John's death, along with Colin Albert. and Brian Albert. As you may recall from earlier, I mentioned that Karen and Higgins had a bit of a flirtation. Karen said she got Higgins' cell number, and she was the one who initiated the conversation. She told him she thought he was hot, and after questioning whether or not she was serious, Higgins then said the feeling was mutual. Karen then said she was having a lot of doubts about her relationship. It had fizzled. She never wanted children, and she was feeling overwhelmed by suddenly having two children. To go from none to two it's a lot. Karen testified that she only flirted with Higgins because she was upset that John had allegedly kissed another woman on their vacation. She said it was very brief and she regretted it. Over the course of probably like a week or two, uh, Karen and Higgins shared dozens of text messages, and apparently there was one single kiss.
So they met in person also.
He had come over because he was a friend of John's. So he had come over apparently at one point. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, he came over to like watch a football game. And I think it happened like as he was leaving when John wasn't paying attention, or at some point when John didn't see.
Uh-huh.
But it was just like a quick, like, peck. It wasn't like tongues or anything, that from what I can understand. I love that for me, it's a peck or it's a tongue, and there's nothing in between.
Nothing in between, baby.
Blanche is always around. So on the night of John's murder, Higgins claimed he was the first person to leave the party. He said he then drove directly to the Canton Police Department to help move vehicles out of the way for the snowplows. He said he arrived home around 2 a.m. However, according to phone records, there was a 22-second phone call between Higgins and Albert at 2:22 a.m. Higgins denies the conversation ever happened. He suggested it was a butt dial. But records show Higgins missed an initial call from Albert, and then Higgins called Albert back.
Mm.
That is one fucking intelligent butt, if it's, doing that. Also, butt dials were were so more likely to happen when phones had actual buttons. It's a little more difficult now, I think, in these, I'm not saying it never happens. I'm just saying everybody's phone calls tonight were all butt dials.
Yeah, yeah.
Also,
yeah.
he got home around 2 and then like went to bed. And then somehow from bed, butt dialed? I don't know.
Yeah.
But in the early morning hours that night, there were multiple phone calls between Higgins, Jennifer, Albert, and Nicole. And funny enough, each one claimed every single phone call was a butt dial.
That's insane.
Even the calls that were proven they didn't go to voicemail, meaning those calls were answered. So somebody butt dialed somebody else and they butt dialed answered, I guess, is how they're all claiming this happened.
Mm-hmm.
It's just weird to have the ability to butt dial while you're sleeping. But we have other sketchy behavior for Higgins that we should focus on. The day after John died, Higgins spoke to his best friend, who is an ATF agent who works at the FBI's computer lab, and he asked his friend for some advice regarding phone data extraction. He testified, quote, "I asked him how I could pull text strings off my cellular telephone for the purpose of providing them to law enforcement." Well, that makes sense. But you know what else would have worked? Just showing police your phone.
Yeah.
Unless there's something on your phone you didn't want police to see, allegedly. It was then found that Higgins went to a forensic lab at a police station and used a kiosk in an unrestricted area to try and pull information from his phone himself. Again, information that the police could have gotten just by handing them the phone. But then Higgins went a step further and he destroyed the phone. He didn't get rid of it. He took the SIM card out. He destroyed the SIM card. He destroyed the phone. Then he drove to a military base and threw the phone and the SIM card into separate dumpsters. When asked why he did it, Higgins said, and I quote, "I have every right to do that." Ah, all of these people.
Yeah, I mean, do you have a right to do that? Absolutely. Is the timing insanely suspect? Also, absolutely.
Isn't it also wild to be like, can I ask, like, why would you do that? I had every right.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. You had the right, but why did you do it? It's just very like, I don't have to tell you.
Yeah.
Uh,
And why drive to a
convenient.
military base to do it?
It's a
Like,
weird choice. It's a weird choice. Conveniently, Higgins destroyed the phone the day before he received an order preventing him from altering or destroying anything on his cell phone,
okay.
which smells to me like someone got tipped off about that happening, allegedly.
Of course.
Higgins then changed his carrier and went and got himself a new phone. You know who else destroyed their cell phone the day right before they were going to receive a protection order preserving it? Ryan Albert. But Albert claimed the timing was just a coincidence because he was due for an upgrade. It's just shocking that they think this is believable.
Yeah.
But one more thing about Higgins before I move on. 90 minutes before Karen's SUV was towed to the police station garage, or I believe it's specifically called Sallyport. I don't know. Higgins accessed the building. The SUV is then brought in at 5:36 p.m. And wouldn't you know, the video footage from the garage at that exact time is missing. I'm not saying Higgins is responsible for the missing footage. I'm just saying what an awful coincidence for him to access that building that he would have had no reason to access. And then there's no video footage of us seeing what condition that car was in when it was brought in. Weird. And while we're on the topic of security footage, the defense hired a private investigator to look for security camera footage, possibly from the Albert house. Wouldn't you know, Albert said he did have a security camera, but weird, he hadn't got around to installing it yet.
Oh boy.
And then the investigator found there was no footage from any of the houses in the neighborhood. But never fear, there was a library positioned kind of between Albert's house and John's house, and that would clearly show Karen driving past, so maybe we'd get a peek at the tail light. But weirdly enough, when the footage was turned over to the defense, the section from 12:37 a.m. to 12:39 a.m. was missing. Right around the time that Karen would have driven past the library. The Canton police deny that the footage was tampered with. The defense filed a motion to compel, stating that they had been only given JPEG copies of photos and they were blurry and kind of useless. And they kind of just kept pushing and asking for real photos and real copies of these photos for 7 months. And then the defense learned, well, the Canton police did not have original photos because the photos they had were taken on a cell phone that no longer exists. Whose cell phone was it? Does that mean 3 cell phones were destroyed during this investigation? Because that number feels incredibly high to me.
Hmm.
Also, Higgins was not an investigator in this case, and neither was Albert. So why would either of them have photos? So it couldn't have been their cell phones. So then it had to be a third cell phone that mysteriously got destroyed in this, which is, again, insane. And if any of this is shocking to you, let me say it's not the only shocking things that the police did in this investigation, which brings me to a small section that I'm just going to call poor police work. They didn't deserve me coming up with something catchier than that. They didn't secure the scene. They didn't get a warrant to search the house. They didn't speak to the homeowners. In fact, of the 4 people in the house at the time when police arrived on scene, they only spoke to Jennifer McCabe on record. Nobody else.
That's weird.
They used a leaf blower to move snow as they searched for evidence. However, I mean, they didn't find any taillight pieces in that initial search. They also didn't find John's shoe in that initial search, which is weird. They found the shoe later on. So I find it weird they didn't find his what was missing shoe at the time. They didn't find it for quite a long time. But also, using a leaf blower is such a terrible idea because you're just spreading potential evidence all over the place. But when they used the leaf blower, they found what they believed were blood drops in the snow. And now this is where it turns into the most insane thing I've ever heard. The officer who found the potential blood, who'd been a police officer for 30 fucking years, went to a neighbor's house, borrowed a pack of red Solo cups, and put the bloody snow in 6 separate cups, then put the cups in a brown paper grocery bag. Nothing sterile, nothing professional in any way, and also probably not the association that Solo Cups is looking for. But the officer wants to be very clear. That bag of Solo Cups was brand new and unopened when he received it. As though that makes it better. But continuing on with the poor police work, there were no photos taken at the scene. So, chain of custody, I don't know. The person in charge of accident reconstruction was simply told, make this make sense with the data you're given, instead of letting them, work the way they normally would and come to their own conclusions. And if we're going to talk about disappointing moves by the police in this case, we have to bring back the lead investigator, Michael Proctor. Now, this is the guy who allegedly found pieces of taillight 3 weeks after this scene was searched multiple times. Now, for one thing, Proctor did not initially disclose the fact that he had personal ties to people involved in the case. Colin Albert was the ring bearer at Proctor's sister's wedding.
Interesting.
And Proctor and his wife Courtney had a close relationship with Colin's parents, Chris and Julie Albert. In fact, just 10 days before John's death, Proctor texted Julie Albert to ask if she'd babysit his children. However, Proctor testified he barely knew Chris and Julie very well. As a mother, I'm not leaving my child with someone I don't know very well. Just feels odd. Julie testified she and Courtney rarely spoke on the phone. Like, barely. But between February and September 2022, Julie called Courtney 67 times, including once on the day that Karen got arrested and 3 times on the day that Karen was arraigned. Julie also admitted in court that she had Proctor's personal cell phone number, and she called him after he interviewed her on February 10th. Why use a personal phone number after the interview? Like, why would you call? What did you have to say about the interview that you wanted said personally? And if that wasn't sketchy enough, Proctor's sister texted Proctor to say Julie, aka Colin's mother, wanted to send Proctor a gift after the investigation was over. What's the gift for? Because it's a gift sounds like Someone is saying thank you for someone doing them a favor, allegedly. Again, I remind you that Colin, his name was not anywhere on those police reports. But I can't talk about Proctor and text messages in the same sentence without talking about what an unprofessional jackass he is. During the investigation, Proctor had a group thread with friends, some of whom were police officers working John's case. In the group thread, Proctor wrote things about Karen Reed, saying, and these are direct quotes, "She's a babe. Weird Fall River accent, though. No ass. Waiting to lock this whack job up." And probably the worst thing he says about her, quote, "Hopefully she kills herself."
Oh my God.
Yeah. Just 16 hours into the investigation, Proctor wrote, quote, "There will be serious charges brought on the girl. She's a whack job cunt. Zero chance she skates. She's fucked." When one of his friends responds, "Well, is the homeowner going to receive some sort of shit as well?" Proctor said, quote, "Nope. Homeowner's a Boston cop too."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. In another group text, Proctor told his supervisors he was searching Karen's phone, and he added, quote, "No nudes yet."
Gross.
Proctor later apologized for the text, calling them unprofessional and regrettable. However, he is adamant that the text did not impact the integrity of the investigation. I mean, in less than 24 hours, he was already talking about how Karen was absolutely going to jail. Not exactly a great mindset for an unbiased investigator. On June 28th, the jurors sent a note to the judge saying they were deadlocked after deliberating for 3 days. The judge wasn't having it. She told them they just haven't deliberated long enough, and she sent them back. On July 1st, the jurors again sent a note saying they were still unable to reach a unanimous verdict. The judge again said, "Get out of here, go back." Hours later, the jurors said that they remained deeply divided and a mistrial was officially declared. Jurors later admitted that they had unanimously agreed that Karen was not guilty on the murder and leaving the scene charges. They said they were really only deadlocked on the manslaughter charge. For the second trial, the defense attempted to get the two charges dismissed because the juries had been unanimous about them. The judge has refused that. Hours after the trial ended, lead investigator Michael Proctor was relieved of duty and a week later suspended without pay. Proctor had a misconduct trial hearing last week, January 15th, but the details, unfortunately, are not made public. On July 9th, Albert's brother Kevin, who was briefly suspended without pay, was put on official leave for evidence that came out during Proctor's testimony. It was stated that Kevin behaved in a way that was unbecoming to a police officer, and he had violated department policies regarding alcohol consumption and possession on the job. Brian Albert, the homeowner, who was never properly interviewed despite a man dying outside his home, he was a sergeant with the Boston police at the time of John's death. In September 2023, Albert retired. Lieutenant Paul Gallagher, who was the 30-year police veteran who had the brilliant idea to collect the blood in solo cups, well, wouldn't you know, he retired casually in the fall of 2024. And Michael Lenk, who was at the scene but neglected to interview Brian Albert or his wife on the record or, search their home, somehow he was promoted to lieutenant in August 2022. Canton Police Chief Ken Berkowitz, who managed to spot evidence while driving past the Albert house, retired in late 2022. He died nearly 2 years later following a battle with cancer. He was 66. So, what really happened to John O'Keefe? Did Karen hit him with the car? Police allegedly found all those pieces of her vehicle's taillight at the scene. John's hair was found on the bumper, but a test for blood on the vehicle came back negative. He had no broken bones, which is typical in a car accident. A forensic investigator testified saying, quote, "The damage on the car was inconsistent with having made any contact with John O'Keefe's body." So if it wasn't the car, well, does that mean that a cover up is possible? I mean, in the grand scheme of anything being possible, then yes. Now, for those who might be like, Christy Lynn, you are being a little like cuckoo and like conspiracy, tinfoil hat, all of that. I just want you to know the distrust that the public has for the Massachusetts State Police is nothing new. Since its inception in 1992, there have been so many scandals linked to that specific police agency that Martin Scorsese made a movie about it. I'm talking about The Departed, which is has a plethora of stars. I mean, DiCaprio, Matt Damon, Jack Nicholson, Mark Wahlberg. And look, I don't have time to get into the movie. I don't have time to get into all the scandals. We could honestly spend an entire year of episodes on the scandals and still not get to everything. Just to give you a quick idea, in 2006, a sergeant was arrested in an FBI sting after he tried to meet up with a minor to have sex. In 2017, a trooper filed a lawsuit claiming he was forced to delete embarrassing details from an arrest report involving a local judge's daughter. In 2018, nearly 50 officers claimed they worked overtime hours, which they did not, which cost taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars. An investigation into that scandal led to 10 criminal convictions of officers. In 2021, the Massachusetts State Police Union's president was convicted of taking kickbacks and using his union debit card for personal reasons. He was sentenced to 30 months for obstruction of justice, tax crimes, and racketeering. In 2024, several troopers were accused of taking bribes. Again, I could go on, but we don't have time. But there is one specific one that I want to mention briefly because it involves a cover up with that organization. I'm going to give you the trigger warning now. This moment will contain mentions of suicide and rape. So, Sandra Birchmore had dreams of one day becoming a police officer. So, in 2010, when Sandra was just 12 years old, she enrolled in the Police Explorers, a youth mentoring program in Stoughton. Matthew Farewell, one of the officers working with the program, took Sandra under his wing. He helped her with her homework in the evenings at the public library. But in 2013, Farwell took things from mentoring to grooming, and the couple had sex for the first time. Although since Farwell was 27 and Sandra was 15, a more accurate description would be statutory rape. This happened just 1 month before Farwell got married.
Ooh.
Sandra and Farwell continued to have a romantic relationship for the next 7 years. Him and his wife in that same time had 3 children.
Oof.
And in December 2020, Sandra told Farwell she was pregnant. 5 weeks later, Sandra was found dead in her apartment, hanging by the strap of her gym bag from her closet doorknob. Even though there was evidence that Sandra and Farwell had an intimate relationship, and he was said to be the last person Sandra had spoken to, he was never investigated. Sandra's therapist told police that Farwell was a suspect because she said there's absolutely no way Sandra would have taken her own life. But the police did nothing. After surveillance footage from Sandra's apartment building came out, which showed a man who looked an awful lot like Farwell just days before her body was found, investigators finally had to interview Farwell. But it was really like laid back. It wasn't like a strict sort of thing. They referred to him by his first name like they were BFFs. Farwell claimed He slept with Sandra once, and she was crazy, because isn't that the way?
Ugh.
They always say she's crazy. He also added she had so many sex partners, there was no way that the baby was his.
Oh, please.
Farwell then surrendered both his personal and work cell phones, but state troopers weren't able to find anything of interest. In fact, the police report claimed that there was no evidence of any sort of relationship between Sandra and Farwell on either of their phones. Sandra's death was then ruled a suicide and the case was closed. But Sandra's friends and family pushed because they were like, this is not possible. Internal affairs got involved and they managed to find text messages that proved statutory rape. But instead of being charged with anything, then Detective Farwell was simply placed on paid leave.
Gross.
But the thing is, what no one realized that was going on behind the scenes at the time, somehow the FBI had gotten wind of this situation and they'd been secretly investigating the case themselves. And somehow they did their actual job because, unlike the first investigators who claimed they found nothing linking Sandra and Farwell, the FBI found text messages between the couple. 32,709 text messages, to be exact. Missing one, that's one thing. Missing nearly 33,000 is a fucking cover up, especially when a week before her death, Sandra texted a friend to say Farwell asked her for a key to her apartment out of nowhere. And when she gave him one, he randomly searched her bathroom and her closet and then said nothing and left. It was also determined that Sandra had not taken her own life. In fact, she'd been strangled. Farwell's twin brother, William, who is also in law enforcement, was placed on leave when it was discovered he used law enforcement databases to do unauthorized searches for Sandra. And he outright lied to the police because it turns out he also had a relationship with Sandra. The woman that was pregnant with his twin brother's child. He said they had sex multiple times, including 22 days before her death. In August 2024, Matthew Farwell was officially arrested for Sandra's murder. No trial has been set just yet. To be clear, I am not saying that every single person linked to the Massachusetts State Police has done something wrong. I'm aware, everybody's aware, good police officers do exist. I'm just pointing out the incredibly large amount of scandals that have occurred within the Massachusetts State Police, and the cover-ups aren't just something that you see in a movie. I'm also not using Sandra's case as evidence that there absolutely was a cover-up in Karen Reed's case. I'm simply saying that based on the fact that investigators were willing to ignore nearly 33,000 text messages, which, painted their fellow officers in a suspicious light, maybe a cover up in Karen's case isn't so far fetched. Is it possible that there is a huge cover up to frame Karen for a crime she didn't commit? Of course. Is it possible Karen accidentally struck John with her car while she was inebriated? I mean, based on his injuries, not likely. But since it was not yet determined in a court of law, I guess we just have to wait for the second trial to find out. After being charged, Karen Reed lost both her jobs, her health insurance, her car, her life savings. She had to sell her house to subsidize her legal fees, which are sitting about $5 million at this point. She's currently living off her 401k. Police have visited her home 3 separate times, seized her personal cell phone twice, and subpoenaed her family's financial records. If this was in fact a cover up, even if Karen manages to get acquitted, this entire thing completely ruined her life. And whether she is guilty or not, I hope the truth comes out. John and his family deserve that much, and so do his niece and nephew, who have already had to live with immense loss for children of that age. In August 2024, John's family filed a wrongful death suit against Karen and the 2 bars which Karen visited, believing that Karen was overserved. They are seeking $50,000 in damages. Both bars have denied over serving. Every eyewitness at the trial testified that Karen didn't appear drunk, but there was never an official record of exactly how many drinks Karen consumed that night. Based on a blood sample taken at 8 a.m., a forensic toxicologist estimates that Karen's blood alcohol level was likely between 0.13 and 0.29 at 12:45 a.m. The legal limit, of course, is 0.08. Karen Reed's second trial was originally scheduled for January 27th. It has since been pushed to April 1st, which seems accurate because charging her with murder feels like an absolute joke, which is quite possibly one of the most beautiful things I've ever written. The trial will be overseen by the same judge, which I feel maybe get a new judge in there. Like, shouldn't we have all
Yeah,
fresh meat? I don't
it
know.
does feel like a conflict of interest.
Yeah. So I guess, stay tuned for an update on this case. Is it going to be an entire full second episode? Really, it comes down to what's going to come up in that trial. But for now, reporting for True Crime and Cocktails, I'm Christy Oxborrow.
Wowzer. Listen, we're kicking off 2025 with one honkin' case. So let's take a quick break, hit the can, grab another drink, and we'll be right back to discuss our thoughts on the Karen Reed case on this episode of True Crime and Cocktails. 2 on 3. 1, 2, 3. Welcome back to this episode of True Crime and Cocktails. We're, of course, discussing the Karen Reed case. A lot to get through here, lots to talk about. I'm going to dive right in. I got to let you know, there's an interesting phenomenon that happens on this show sometimes. And that is, as I'm hearing you tell me about the case, there's a memory buried deep in my brain where I go, I've seen this Dateline. I watch
Yeah,
so much Dateline, and there's so many stories that I can never remember names, obviously.
of course.
But as you were going through this, I was like, oh, this case, right. So I love that all this time people have been talking about Karen Reed, and I was like, I don't know that case. No, you do. You just don't remember. Anyway, I wasn't following the court trial closely, but anyway. All right. So many things here. So many things.
Yeah,
I listen, goes without saying that like any humans are capable of like being good or bad, of making good decisions and bad decisions. Like it doesn't matter if you're a cop, it doesn't matter if you're whoever, everyone can make good
sure.
and bad decisions, right? It is interesting to me that they're just like, I'm going to say something that is extremely heteronormative, but go with me for a second. Isn't it interesting that she was the one driving? Now, I understand that it's possible. It's possible that he drove them to the party. She was waiting for him. He didn't come back. So then she got into the driver's seat and drove home.
Sure.
But if that was the case, she would have gotten out of the car, I'm assuming, to go around and get into the driver's seat. And then would she have hit him with her car? She would have seen him. I guess she could have gone around the front and he was around the back and she didn't notice. But if we're to believe what she said was true, that they went, she was like, I don't know if we should go in. He's like, I'll check it out. 10 minutes later, he hasn't come back. She can't get a hold of him. So she just leaves. First of all, that's weird to me. I think there's something up with that. Like, wait, what? Your husband? You didn't go into the house after your husband? He's like, I'm gonna check it out, and
Sure.
then she just stays in the car, and then when he doesn't answer his phone, she just drives away. That's weird to me. And again,
Sure.
if she was that drunk, right?
Yeah,
Why was he letting her drive? Because, again, speaking misogynistically, which I am not suggesting I share these views, make it very clear.
sure.
But you would think in those scenarios, like we're dealing with people of a profession that has a little bit of, I'll say it, machismo. I think that that's fair to say.
Mhm.
Um, it's interesting to me that he would put his wife in a position where she would be the one driving, especially when she was that drunk. I'm not saying that he was any better, but it's just odd. You would think that that's the kind of like bravado that a tough guy would be like, I'm fine to drive. Like, why would he let her drive? Or why would he put her in a position where he would have probably known that she could take off and drive? Like, I don't know. There's just something that's up. This is the thing I'm going to say. I think top to bottom, this thing is bizarre.
Yeah,
Now, by the way, what I've just outlined doesn't prove that she murdered him or that she accidentally killed him either. I'm just
sure.
pointing out that it's like, it seems odd to me. It's just, look, at best, it's super passive aggressive that he's like, I'm going to go in and check it out. 10 minutes later, he's not back. So she's like, fuck this, I'm leaving. Like,
Sure.
that is wild to me. But, and then to go home and be like, you're cheating on me. Like, it's like, why wouldn't you go in the house after him?
It is interesting that she didn't choose to go to the house.
So that says to me, is there another reason she didn't go in the house? What was the experience like at the bar before they went there? Is this one of
Mhm.
those things where they're driving over and she's like, I don't want to go there. I don't get a good vibe from these people. I don't like these people. Whatever, insert, we're speculating here. But like,
Sure.
is there another reason? Because it just feels, I understand the concept of like, oh, there's not that many cars here. Are we really invited? Are we an afterthought? I don't know if we should go in. I
Sure.
get that. Like that makes sense to me. I also understand him being like, let me go. I'll take a look at the vibe. That makes sense to me. Again, I would personally be like, I'm not going to stay in the car in the dead of winter. I'm going to probably go with you.
Yeah.
Um, but okay, fine. I can believe these things. Sure. But why? Why was she so reticent to go to the house? To me, it's like, what there was roughhousing shown at the bar. Was she like, this is giving me a bad feeling? Was it the fact that, because Higgins was at the bar with them, right? And there had been
Right.
this previous flirtation. Was she like, oh, I feel uncomfortable. I don't want to be around this man I was being inappropriate with, also around my husband? Like, I just think there was another layer there. And again, that doesn't prove
Sure.
that she's guilty, but it just doesn't make sense to me that she was all happy go lucky and like, okay, well, I guess I'll leave then. Like, what?
Yeah, I get the feeling like did she I assume she left angry
Right. That's what it feels like to me, right?
because I have to assume that he went inside and she texted and was like, "Hey, what's up?" And then he just wasn't responding. And then she finally was like, yeah,
I don't know. It's odd, right? It just feels odd to me.
yeah.
Um, I also just have to say very quickly, these poor children. They
Oh,
lose
I
their mother, they
know.
lose their father, they lose their uncle. Like, what a terrible tragedy for these kids. Their whole lives. My God, that's so
Yeah.
sad. Um, okay. She thought maybe she backed into him without knowing. I remember that from the Dateline. Um, she was very drunk.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me. The only thing I'll say, because I hear you that it's like the injuries aren't conducive to a being hit by a car. The only thing I'll say, because I'm just looking at all of this
Of
um,
course.
from every angle, is if he was super drunk and didn't see the car coming, because they always say the thing that injures you in an accident is you
Oh, is when you
bracing
tense
and
up.
right.
Yep.
So if he's completely loosey goosey and then gets
Sure.
hit by the car, is it possible that that could have sustained less injuries on his body? I think so. What that doesn't
Sure.
explain is the gouges on his arms.
Yeah.
Doesn't explain that. So that's interesting to me because my next question would be, were there bite marks or gouges in his coat? Where was his winter coat? I'm assuming he would be wearing a winter coat or at least a long sleeve if it's winter time and it's very snowy.
Yeah. From the looks of it, he had a t-shirt on and then he had a hoodie on.
So what was the hoodie? What was the state of the hoodie? Only because if we're to believe that he sustained the arm injuries from getting
Yeah.
hit by the car, then the hoodie would be ripped.
Yeah.
And
Well,
by the way, I mean it could still be if it was an attack inside the house, but I also would believe I would be easier to believe that he took the hoodie off in the house because you're coming
it's
in from the cold,
possible.
right?
From my understanding, they swabbed the hoodie to get whether to test whether or not it was dog DNA.
Oh, it wasn't the wounds.
No, I don't think they did the
Interesting.
wounds at all.
Oh, great. Well, that makes sense. Um, The snowplow driver, I don't know what I make of that. I really don't.
Yeah,
Then I said, now here's a wild theory.
it
What
was
if
the
he did it?
snowplow driver. There it
Honestly,
is.
honestly, think about this for a second. Is it possible she drops him off at the house? She's pissed. She leaves. Something bad happens. Let's say something bad happened in that house. They get into a fist fight. The dog attacks him. Any of all of the above. He's maybe leaving, waiting for someone to come pick him up or whatever in his own mind. I don't know. Or he's going to
Sure.
walk home. Who knows? Is it possible, jokes aside, that he was hit by a snowplow? The snowplow gouged his arms in some way that would not normally typically happen with a hit of a car. And then he conveniently didn't see anything. I mean, in the grand scheme of anything being possible, did
Oh,
the
you have
snowplow
to.
get tested?
Yeah.
No, I'm of course not,
Oh,
right?
no, they
So,
didn't talk to him for over a year.
right. So again, I just don't know how much I can believe because the other thing too, if there was 6 inches of snow, let's get real about this for a second. If Karen did hit him and then drive away,
Sure.
6 inches of snow, it's more than possible that snowplow driver would not have seen him laying in the snow. That's more than
Sure.
possible, right? Now, again, not only would he have not seen him laying in the snow, he would have hit him himself. You know what I'm saying? Potentially. So, just putting that out there.
Oh,
Um,
I found a picture of the injuries
oh, great.
because I mean, it'll be in the case file, but for her specifically, like
Interesting.
they just look very like dog nail, dog teeth.
Yeah.
Like especially the right there looks like a row of teeth
Yeah.
almost.
That's interesting.
But it's tough to say because I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. The leaf blower to move snow. Now, I don't know if you're not somebody who's grown up in snow, all I'll have to say about that is how light was the snow?
It really depends because if it was a wet
If it's wet
snow,
snow, good
good
luck.
luck.
That's ridiculous. And the cold air would just be causing the snow to like, it wouldn't be melting the snow. I'm
Correct.
assuming the air from the leaf blower is cold. I don't know. I shouldn't assume that. Maybe it's not, but that's ridiculous. How is there Berkowitz as a name in here? Because what? We're
I
just like
know.
channeling serial killers? Okay,
I
great.
tried so hard to keep saying it and act like it was normal to say.
You did a great
It
job.
is on a true crime podcast, I guess.
It does feel unlikely. Yeah, exactly. It does feel unlikely to me that there would be no blood on the car. But again, not impossible. It depends how hard she hit him. This is the other possibility.
Mm,
Was she wheeling out there and hit him hard, or did she not hit him that hard? He goes down because he's stumbling drunk and then just doesn't get back up. Like, again, cause of death is the hit to the head. Is it possible that he didn't get hit that hard? Therefore, there wasn't that damage to that much damage to the car or that much damage to him. And then, you know, is it possible? Let's go on another wild scenario here for a second.
I can't wait.
Is it possible they both went into the house? Okay. She got out of
I'm
the car.
listening.
They both go in. Something happens. Maybe the dog attack happens. Something happens. She's like, we need to leave. And he's like, it's fine. She's like, we gotta go. He's like, no, we don't. Is that possible?
Sure.
They come back out of the house. They're arguing, whatever. She does accidentally hit him. He's got at that point, he's been in the altercation with the dog. He's hit not that hard, but it falls him over. It makes him fall over. He hits his head. He dies. And I mean, and then for whatever reason, she was intimidated or whatever. And the truth never came out that they had both been in that house. They never talked to anyone else was in the house.
No.
We're only going by her account of that part of the story. Was
Yeah.
there an altercation between John and Higgins? And then she was like, I'm out of here. He follows her back out to the car. Don't do this, whatever. You know,
It's possible.
I don't know. Like again, he gets behind the car trying to stop her from leaving. She backs into him. I don't know. Again, I'm trying to find like, is there a they all did it? Like, is there a
Oh,
world in which the truth is in the middle? You know what I'm saying? Like,
I mean, it's
now what that
possible.
What that doesn't explain is the hiding of evidence, the destroying of phones, all of the phone calls between one another. Like, I understand that that's ignoring a bunch of the other pieces here, but I don't know. It's again, there's something, I get why this case has unraveled people. Um, Colin saying he's never been in a fight. There's scabs on his knuckles. I don't know any human being on the face of the planet, as somebody who grew up in ice and fell on ice a million times as a
Yep.
child, preteen, teenager, and adult. Never once in my life have I ever fallen on ice and my hand turned to the back and I landed on the back of my hand, skidding it. No way.
Correct.
No way. I've fallen so many times, folks. You always try to brace yourself. It's always the palm of
Yep.
your.
Oh,
No
yeah.
way. I don't buy that for a second. That's
No.
bullshit. And I feel like I may have logged 10,000 falls. At 10,000 hours
Oh,
makes you
it
an
was
expert. So there you go.
ah,
It's
I
a
also love
terrible, terrible experience.
well, I love that I'm like, well, if I showed you the one, I'll see if I can find his knuckle injury.
Oh, please. What was upstairs at the house? Oh, please. That's from a fist fight or he punched a wall. He punched a brick wall or he punched a person. He may not have punched a person, but that's not from falling on ice.
Correct. Right?
No way. No way.
And it's
Um,
also like slightly healed, but also he's been picking at it
oh yeah, it's
from
gross.
looks of it. Again,
Leave it
don't panic.
alone.
These are all going to go.
Get some polysporin on there.
Thank you so
Um,
much.
okay. The Apple app, the health app logged stairs.
Yes.
We know that Brian Albert said he may have gone upstairs with Brian Higgins. What was upstairs? What's happening upstairs? Is that where they all go up, the dog's waiting, and he's like, attack for whatever reason? Is there an altercation or confrontation that happens between Higgins and John up there? What's upstairs? Why are you also taking people upstairs during some sort of like drunken partying? I don't know. It's weird to me.
I don't know. He also, like the fact that he said he took him upstairs, then my brain immediately is like, do I trust this man? And is he trying to throw us off the scent? And it's they went and hung out downstairs.
Right.
But so in his mind, he was like, no, I was as far as you could be from the basement. But don't
Right.
worry, they didn't search the basement.
Oh, I looked up replacing concrete. Do you need to replace concrete after a flood?
Sure.
And it says it depends on the extent of the damage. Um, Small cracks or surface erosion can be patched. Larger cracks, spalling, or areas where concrete has been completely washed away likely need replacement. The concrete would not have been washed away. Um, Prolonged exposure to floodwater could cause more severe damage. Um, Only possibility could be, did it compromise the foundation of the house in some way? Is that why they had to? But again,
Interesting.
I'm feeling like it would have to be pretty significant for a pretty large amount of time for them to have to re-pour concrete. That feels, again, suspect.
Right.
Um, I had flooding happen in my garage, which is a concrete floor,
Right.
multiple times, and no. And by the way, like if you have a concrete floor down there anyway, I guess it was under the flooring or whatever. Like, are you
Right.
really like how bad are these cracks that you're willing to like re-pour concrete? That's also not a cheap, I'm assuming.
Well,
That's
it
not
can't
like
be.
a quick fix. Like that's going to require people other than you. I mean, I think I don't know how handy it is, how handy he is. Um, this whole how long to die in cold Google search, I wrote down, I need to be more aware of what I'm Googling and when. Because I Google shit all day, every day. And goddamn,
Oh,
I
sure.
pray it's never looked up. Not that I'm Googling anything bad, but it's like, these are the things, right? We would potentially Google how long does it take someone to die in the cold. That's because we're talking about a case. It's got nothing to do
Yeah.
with
Oh,
actually
that
wanting to know.
defense. The defense is going to be like they have a true crime podcast. They're going to
Your Honor.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I love. There's not a world that we're going to be committing a crime that's so bad that
No.
the prosecution is like, look at these Google searches. They're suspicious, and the fact that I love that I'm trying to in advance give our lawyer tips that it's
Yeah.
like, well, we have a true crime podcast, just use that. Um,
What a
that's
joke.
that's insane, and I unfortunately could see someone in the future being like, "I have a true crime podcast, I can search anything like that."
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I Googled at 6 a.m., not 2:30. That's when I last had the window open. That doesn't make any sense. By the way, it also doesn't seem insane to me that she would Google that at 6 a.m. if they had just found him dead. That it
Sure.
could have been her being like, "Oh my God, like how long was he out here? Look it up. How long did it take him to die?" He wasn't fully dead yet, but you know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
does he have a chance to live? Like, I don't think that that's actually that insane to me, but call me crazy.
Sure.
Um, Another wild theory. Nicole said she slept through all of it. She said her daughter left early, but then later it came out that her adult daughter, left
Yeah.
last. Why are they protecting her? Just in general? They were like, oh, she left at the beginning. She had nothing to do with this. Or was she a part of this? Was there something where John was hitting on her, getting inappropriate, and then
Oh,
people were not pleased about that? I don't know. We don't know if he kissed this other woman while they were on vacation.
true.
Let's say for a second, maybe he did. Does he have a pattern of this kind of behavior? I have no idea, by the way. And even if he did, that does not justify anyone murdering him.
Of
So
course.
don't start connecting A to B that doesn't exist. Um, I'm just trying to think of any possible motive. Because again, otherwise it's
Sure.
like, why would these guys kill him? Like accidental and then a cover up? Okay, but like what's the motive otherwise? Like I'm just trying to figure out if there's anything else here.
Oh, I
The
have to believe if it is them, it was accidental.
Right.
And then they were like, "Oh shit, we've got to do something about this."
I mean, again, like the fact that Brian Higgins and Karen were flirting over texts, and then when he came over to watch football, they did share a chaste kiss. Like, what are these people doing?
I
Are
know.
you in high school? What are you doing?
You're in
Stop
your
it.
40s. Calm down.
In your 40s. Enough. Enough. Um, the fact that that multiple phones were destroyed right after they found out that they were going to get told to not destroy their phones. Excuse me, they were destroyed right before they were going to be told that.
The
Like,
day before. Yeah.
how convenient. Yeah, the two separate dumpsters on a military base, bizarre. Sure, that's his right. Still super suspicious. Um, oh my God, the snow in the solo cups. I can't even begin. I can't even begin. Um, okay. So they're claiming, oh, this was Michael Proctor. I believe it was his wife contacting Colin Albert's parents, and Proctor's wife said, "Oh yeah, no, I'm not close with this woman." And then you revealed that between February and September of 2022, they called each other 67 times.
Yeah.
Christy Oxborrow is my best friend on the planet. I've called you once in 3 years, and it was because Pedro Pascal tweeted at me.
Yeah.
Maybe twice in 5 years, maybe twice in 5 years we got on the phone, and each time it's like, what the fuck has happened? Like, what is going on?
It's got to be
Um,
pretty big for there to
it's
be a
got to be
phone.
pretty big for there to be a phone call involved. So again, I'm
Yeah.
just like the fact that these women were like, we weren't close. 67 phone calls? My
Yeah.
God. I don't think
Yeah.
we've had 67 phone calls since like 2008. Now,
Yeah.
that being said, when you were getting into, of course, the Sandra Birchmore case, and then the FBI magically found 32,000 text messages between her and a dude, I was like, no, this is closer to Christy and I's relationship. 32,000 text
Yeah.
messages? We could potentially do that in 30 days. But my point is,
It's true. They did that over what, 7 years? Or, well, I
yeah,
don't know if she had a cell phone back
well,
when she was young, but
well, a
yeah, I'd
child,
like
yes.
to know the time frame because
Thank you.
I'd also like to know our numbers.
Exactly. I'd love to pull up our records.
Yeah.
Oh God, it would be amazing. Um, the group thread that Michael Proctor, like these comments he was making, you're gonna love this. I have to take a quick moment. He
Yeah.
was talking about how she's hot, but she has no ass. This is something that I need to speak on very quickly as an
Sure.
aside. When we were growing up, tell me I'm wrong. You won't. You know I'm right. When we were growing up, and I'm talking just that time in history, everybody,
Sure.
there was a common phrase that would get thrown around all the time, which is, do these jeans make my butt look big? Right?
Oh, yeah.
And the
Yeah, yeah,
whole
yeah.
thing was like, you don't want your butt to be big, got to keep your butt small. Like
Yeah.
this is a total thing. I love that at some point in our lives, everything switched to the point that now, because this was in the last few years, it's like, oh, no butt though. And it's like, we were programmed from childhood that it was like, you've got to be as small as possible. Then at some point, they flipped
Yeah.
the switch.
They
They
did.
flipped the script. And then suddenly it's like, oh, gross, you have no butt. Fuck off with all of it. With all of it, fuck off. Enough. I'm done. I'm over it. I'm done. Meanwhile, he's searching her phone for nudes. So I guess her non existent butt wasn't enough to turn you off of looking specifically for nudes, which I want to remind you would probably have no bearing on this case.
I
You
could
thought
not love you more just
you
now.
thought you were yelling about men. Get ready. I can't. I can't. It makes me crazy. Anyway, I have one final thought, maybe two. I have to speak very quickly on this Sandra Birchmore case.
Mm.
And of course, yeah, to your point, you don't miss 32,000 text messages. That's you've ignored them. Um, I completely agree with you on that. She was strangled, we know that, instead of hanging herself. Then there's the reveal that this man has a twin and he'd also had sex with her.
Yep.
Here's my question. Did she know she was having sex with the twin? How identical are they?
Um, I think they were close, but not like I think it was slightly different. I'll double check.
But my point just is that it's like making her, whatever. It's trying to, with him saying things like, oh, she had so many sex partners, whatever. My point is, was the twin deceiving her and pretending to be his brother in order to get in there?
Interesting. Oh no. Well, no. No, no.
Not identical.
I'm trying to find why is that the only side by side? It's like this dark. Oh, and then I turn it and it okay. Well, yeah. That's apparently them.
Not close enough. Okay. Well, that throws that out of the water. Anyway, listen, my final thoughts are this. If her blood alcohol level is between 0.13 and 0.29 at 8 a.m. the next day, yeah, that's significant. You've had time to sleep that off. Look, it's happened. I'm certain that I would have blown at similar levels the morning after a night of heavy drinking. No judgment.
Sure.
Again, I wouldn't get behind the wheel of a car, but that's neither here nor there. Um, I guess my only other question, and there's no answer to this, obviously, is it possible both things are true? Is it possible, again, they all did it. Is it possible that like everyone's involved in some way? Is it possible like because again, I still have not we still don't have any sort of firm real motive. It feels to your point that it's like whoever did it, it was an accident because it just doesn't feel
Mhm.
like there's enough motive. Although again, we do know that there was some inappropriate behavior between Higgins and Karen. I don't know, is that enough to like cause a murder? It doesn't feel like it, but it is enough. It feels like that it could cause behavior that led to an accidental death potentially. Who knows? Um,
Sure.
I think it's very interesting that the jury was sent back multiple times. That's very rare, I believe. And I just
Yeah.
did a quick Google on the break because my perception of hearing people talk about this trial, uh, I have nothing to base this on, but my perception was that everyone thought that Karen Reed was guilty. And it feels to me throughout, this episode that it doesn't feel like that's as cut and dry as my perception was. But again, I could be
Sure.
wrong and nobody thinks that or whatever. Um, but the jury did find her ultimately not guilty of two of those three charges. Now, the
Yeah.
first thing that came up when I very quickly Googled, does everyone think Karen Reed is guilty? Um, because I was like, have I made this up? Why did I assume that? I just thought I had seen people writing things that alluded to that. Regardless, apparently the form that the jury was supposed to fill out didn't have a box that says not guilty. It only had the 3 charges listed and a box that says guilty for each one. And the defense lawyer is kind of having it out with the judge going, well, this is insane. Like, what do you like? And she's like, no, this is the way it works. If they don't check the box, that means not guilty. And he's like, that's not a thing. So I haven't had time to Google this further,
Sure.
um, to see who's right or wrong or in the middle about that. But it is interesting to me that this judge was like, you haven't come to a decision yet, go back again. Like, that is so rare to send the jury back like 3 times.
Especially when it's like you literally gave them one choice.
Right. On the form, it was like guilty or nothing.
That
And I
feels weird.
understand her logic that it's like, oh, well, if they don't check the box, that means not guilty. And I'm like, but this lawyer is suggesting that it's like, that's not something I've seen before. Typically there's a box for both and you check the one
Right.
that you're saying.
Because if you don't check the box, couldn't you just say, like, they just didn't fill it out?
100%.
So it just feels weird. But also to me, if you're doing a whole new trial, a whole new judge, whole new jury, I don't think it should be the same judge.
I am shocked that that's happening. It does feel like a complete conflict of interest to me.
Because there's got to be something that came up in the first that they're going to turn around and be like, you can't mention it in the second.
Of course.
But
Of course.
like the judge is never going to forget the stuff that she's already heard about this.
No.
And I'm not just specifically meaning that woman. I just mean every time there's a second trial. I mean, let the lawyers be the same, fine, because it takes so long to work a case and all of these sorts of things, fine. But judge and jury should be different every
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. I don't disagree. I don't disagree. And listen, sometimes people in those situations get new lawyers because they're like, well, you didn't do it, so let's get a new one. Like, that's
Sure.
also not out of the realm. But listen, this is a fascinating case. The next trial, of course, April 1st, 2025. I'm now invested. So all of you who were so invested, and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, even though I did from Dateline, unknowingly, I'm in now. I'm in now. Let's go. Let's
Yeah.
see what happens next. I mean, what a
Yeah.
wild, wild story. And ultimately so sad, that this man like had taken in his niece and nephew. You know, uh, it's. I mean, of course, any death like that is always tragic in every way, but it's also like there's no clear motive, there's no clear
Right.
murder weapon, there's no clear anything. And ultimately,
Yeah.
no matter how you want to slice it, the bottom line is that in your very aptly named poor police work section, I think
Ha.
if nothing else, we can agree that it was not properly handled. I don't even think that that's a
No.
matter of opinion. And listen,
No.
something we hear about all the time on this show.
All the
So
time.
that's
Yeah.
not out of the realm. Christy Oxborrow, fantastic work. Our longest episode in some time. So much
Yeah.
information to get through. I mean, very to the, you were to the point, you were succinct, but also thorough. We don't deserve you. Thank you for your work.
It's an honor.
And
It's an
listen,
honor.
we thank you, dear listeners, for joining us here for this episode. If you haven't already, give us a follow on the socials on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at True Crime and Cocktails, on Twitter at Not Detectives. If you'd like some bonus content, go over to patreon.com/True Crime and Cocktails to learn more about our subscription-based service over there. And of course, the only place for official True Crime and Cocktails merch is, of course, truecrewmerch.com. So check that out as well if you're interested. And please, if you're in Toronto or the surrounding area, come to my concert February 12th, Anti-Valentine's. You can be in love. Doesn't mean you can't come. I just didn't enjoy the fact that I'm not looking forward to Valentine's Day this year. And I got a lot of It's My Jagged Little Pill music coming. I think you're all going to really like it. Christy, do you want to tell the people about next week's episode?
On the next True Crime and Cocktails, Glitter and Greed, the Lisa Frank story.
Oh, I am excited for this. I finished watching that documentary and I have opinions. Um,
Oh,
Christy, do you want to tell the people? Do you want to say goodnight to the people? There it is.
Good night, Hidden Ranch.
Oh,
Hidden Valley, Hidden Ranch. Christ, I fucked that. Good night, ranch people.
yeah. Good night, ranch people.